Okay. Good. Let me introduce you to them first. 大家好，很高兴今天又邀请 Washington Point Center，就是预防中毒的中心的Megan 跟 Alex 他们来演讲，谢谢你们。那今天应该会跟上次一样，就是在每一张 slide 最后用中文简单的跟大家解释一下而已。对，那大家有什么问题也可以在聊天啊，或是在就自己提出来也可以。对，非常谢谢他们。Okay, thank you. Yeah, introduce them to introduce you to them. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. So good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jerry, for giving us an introduction. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces and names from the last time, a couple months ago, that I was able to present to you all. So really excited to be back here this morning. And I'm joined by one of my colleagues, Alex. We both have the same position at the Washington Poison Center. So he's going to join us today to add some additional information, because we are going to talk about managing medications, and Alex is going to cover some information on opioids and opiates, because I heard from Jerry that that is a topic of interest for many of you. So we will probably, a lot of the medication information is going to be familiar to you because we covered it last time, a lot of the same elements, but we will dive much deeper into opioids. And so you're welcome to ask us any questions throughout. We have a lot of flexibility in this presentation, so just ask any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Megan 他说就是很高兴再来一次，因为其实他上次他有寄信给我说，他非常谢谢你们分享，还有问了很多很好的问题。那今天会讲一些药物管理的知识还有技巧，可能跟上次讲的有一点相似，但是他也请了他的同事 Alex 来，他是专门讲鸦片类的一些药物的一些专家。那会有很多关于一些鸦片类药物的一些知识跟大家分享。
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And just a quick overview of the Washington Poison Center. We are one of 55 in the United States, and we've been here in Washington for over 60 years. So we want to be sure that everyone first is on the same page of what we mean by the word poison, because it can be kind of confusing for people to hear us talk about medications and opioids. So for us, anything can be a poison if it's used by the wrong person, in the wrong amount, or used the wrong way, or even if someone is just worried that it might be harmful for them. So we help with pretty much any kind of substance that you can think of, and we get lots of different types of calls to our poison helpline, which I'll talk about in the next slide. We get calls from people who've had accidents, people who have had medication errors, environmental exposures, so like snake bites, insect bites and stings, people who have called with self-harm cases, people who have been using substances, and then also drug overdose.
华盛顿这个预防中毒的中心，他们已经成立了大概超过60年。那他们会处理很多只要跟中毒有关的东西的事情，他们都可以帮忙处理。所以大家可能会很好奇，为什么他们会谈药物啊，或是来谈这个鸦片类的一些药物？那可能因为这跟他们中毒都有关系，因为他们可能意外啊，或是药物使用错误啊，还有环境的一些危害，像是蛇咬、虫咬，或是有些人自己会伤害自己，或是物质滥用，或是使用药物过量，都是他们可以帮忙处理的。
So this is our poison helpline number. It's actually a national telephone number. So you can call this anywhere in the United States and you will reach your local poison center. It is always available 24/7 every day of the year. And it's also always free. We never ask for your insurance information. We are never going to send you a bill. Calling us is completely confidential. So if you go into a doctor's office or the hospital, they have what's called HIPAA laws. Those apply to us as well. And then if English is not your preferred language, we have interpretation in over 260 languages.
这个电话是1800222122，是全国的电话。那你在全美各地都可以打这个电话，那他们会帮你转接到当地的中毒的中心来帮你们咨询这样子。那它是免费的，然后24小时每天都有的。他不会跟你要保险公司的资讯。那如果说您需要就是一些翻译的话，也可以跟他们要求有翻译。那这些资料都是保密的。
So when you call that helpline number, you're going to talk with one of our expert staff members. They are all called specialists in poison information. So these are nurses or pharmacists who have gone through a lot of training to help you with any sort of substance that you have come into contact with. So if they ever need any additional help, though, we also always have board certified medical toxicologists. These are doctors who have specialized in poisons. They're always available around the clock, so they can help with some of those more complex cases if needed.
接电话的通常就是已经受过很多训练的护士啊、药师啊，或是一些专业的人员，他们会来接电话，帮助大家立即处理问题。那如果说有比较复杂的问题，他们也有一些就是在线的一些药物的那个毒物学的博士可以帮忙咨询。
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you all. You can either put this in the chat box or you can unmute yourselves. For older adults, so adults that are 60 years old or older, what do you think are the main reasons why they call us?
大家可以在聊天室打下来，或是现在 unmute 你自己回答，就是有哪些危害是60岁以上的成人在2020年最常发生的，跟中毒有关。
Medication?
Yep, medications. Any other guesses?
Accident.
Accidents. Any others?
Perhaps food poisoning as well?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, you definitely got the first two. Medication errors are our number one, and older adults really make up the biggest proportion of all of our medication error cases too. And then accidents. So accidents with cleaning products or any sort of other non-pharmaceutical product.
所以刚刚 Peter 跟树他们答对了前2个，对啊。那像药物使用还有意外，有可能有一些清理的一些化学药品意外造成意外是蛮常发生的。
Okay, so we're going to talk about medication errors since we're all about managing medications today, and that's our number one exposure reason for older adults.
所以我们今天会谈药物错误的问题，那就是我们刚刚所谈的第一名的有可能发生的错误。
So this is probably a bit of a review for any of you who joined the last presentation, but just a really easy explanation of what medication errors are. They're typically going to be any of these 5 wrongs. So the wrong dose of a medication, meaning you took your pills twice, or you took 3 pills when you were only supposed to take 2.
Yeah, you can
translate each one as we go.
Oh yeah, sure. 所以第一点就是剂量的问题，可能你不小心吃了2颗，或是吃了3颗之类，本来你只需要吃1颗这样子，或是你少吃，对，就多吃或少吃。
So then, oops, don't know how I just did that. Taking the wrong medicine is the next wrong. So you accidentally took an old prescription, or you mixed up what you were supposed to take. You took NyQuil instead of Pepto-Bismol.
再来就是可能你吃错了药物，可能你吃到旧的药物，然后你没有就是吃错药物，那对你也是有危害的。
The wrong person means you took someone else's medication, your spouse's medication, or even your pet's medication.
你可能吃到别人的药，甚至你吃到你宠物的药。
the wrong time, you took your medicines too close together, for example.
错误的时间，可能有些药要间隔3-4个小时，但是你太快吃了。
And then the last one, the wrong way, you accidentally swallowed a medication that was supposed to be just put on your skin.
你可能吃了一些有一些药物可能是要涂在身上的，但是你不小心吞下去了。
So older adults have a lot of medication errors for a lot of different reasons, but these are probably the main ones. The first is that typically older adults take more medications than other age groups. That's sometimes you might have some age-related changes that require medications, or you might have some conditions or diseases that require medications. So usually older adults are going to take more medications than younger people. There are also, when you're taking these medications, you might have a lot more complex of a care plan to follow. You might be taking multiple doses of multiple medications that are being described by multiple providers. So it can be really complicated to try to understand all of the different details and make sure you're following everything correctly. And then finally, aging comes with changes to your body. It's a fact of life. And some of those changes can make it more difficult to take medications safely, like some physical changes, like your eyesight is going to get a little worse as you age. So it might be harder for you to read medication labels or to see the medications that you are taking. And you might also have some cognitive decline. That's totally normal with age, but it might make you a little bit more forgetful when you're taking your medications.
为什么就是在发生药物错误很常发生呢？尤其是在年长者的部分，因为年长者通常吃的比较多的药物，那他们通常有很多不同的一些计划，尤其是你可能会看不同的医生，那不同医生就会给你不同的药，然后不同的药又有不同的时间点、不同的剂量，那你可能都会就是搞混啊，不记得。那你要他建议大家要去清除这些你吃的药物。那最后还有可能跟一些老化的一些功能退化有点关系，就是可能你的眼睛视力不好了，你可能没办法清楚的阅读这个标签，或是说你可能有一些可能记忆有点容易健忘，那你可能就会忘记你有没有吃过药，这样子就可能会造成一些危险。
And then on top of all of those normal things that happen as you age, we've had this ridiculous year with the pandemic, with all sorts of other things happening. And that can add a lot of stress to our lives, and it can make us a lot more distracted, forgetful. We might have really different daily routines than what we have previously always had. So that can make us more forgetful when we're taking our medications. There are lots of rumors and misinformation that's out there. So we might end up taking a substance that isn't very safe for us because we've heard that it might help prevent COVID. So there are a lot of additional factors this year that have made older adults more susceptible to medication errors.
所以尤其在这一年，然后有 COVID-19 的关系，那我们可能有新的一些日常生活的规律，那可能就会让我们本来有一些已经熟悉好的规律，然后可能我们有些提醒自己的地方已经可能要重新来过，那可能就会造成错误。还有很多的压力啊，然后会让大家会分心啊，然后就是会让你造成混乱错误。还有一些就是常常有一些消息，一些不实的消息，可能说这个东西可以预防这个 COVID-19，那有些人就会去吃了，但其实是对身体有害的。对，然后做一点就是可能有一些就是大家就是照顾者没办法来照顾你们，所以可能要自己照顾自己的话，有可能也会有一些错误的产生。
Okay, so now all of you get to help with this section a little bit. So again, you can type in the chat box or you can unmute yourselves, but we're going to go through some different examples. And you're going to help me explain to you all how these situations, these examples could lead to medication errors. So first, we have a medicine cabinet. And I think a lot of people's medicine cabinets look like this. I know I am prone to mine looking like this sometimes. So I want us first to just identify, what do you see in here? What are some potential problems that you're seeing in here?
I see a mess.
Yes.
对，大家可以提出来，就是等下他会有几些问题问大家，那大家可以在聊天室打上去，或是在这个没有自己提出来说这有什么问题。那他第一个想问大家的问题就是这个医药柜有什么问题，有可能有产生什么有可能的危害是什么？
I think not just mess, it's very messy. Also, they might be expired long time ago.
Yep.
Expiration date, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Any others?
And I think they didn't sort it out on, on the purpose, because they might some for cold, some might for other medication purpose, but they just mix them all together. Yeah. So they didn't sort it out on their the way they're supposed to be for the different purpose. Yeah.
That is a great one that I don't actually have written down here. I should add that. Thank you.
No, I'll get a prize for that.
I wish we were in person, then I could be throwing out prizes for answers. So you all got all of them and additional. So first, yeah, the medications, they're unorganized. It's very messy in there. So in addition to them being mixed together by purpose, it also looks like different family members' medications are mixed together. So like down here at the bottom, on the bottom shelf, you see a joint juice box, but then there's also Pedialax. So something for older adults and then something for little kids. So they're definitely all mixed together. And then as Joanna said, yeah, there's probably some expired medications as well, some leftover medications that aren't needed anymore.
对，所以刚刚的 Peter 跟 Joanna 他们有提出一些问题，就是说这个是过期的，有可能会有过期的药物，或是就是很混乱的。对，那所以这个药柜就是没有整理好，那有可能像他刚提出这个，有的是这个关节的药物，是给大人用的，那有可能这个就是另外一个药物给小朋友用的，所以就是不同的家庭成员就是用这些药物，那可能会使用错人，或是对，那可能会拿错。那当然还有一些就是过期的药物，对，那大家多注意一下。
Okay, so taking it to the next step, these problems, what errors or what of those 5 wrongs do you think could happen with these problem areas?
所以这个对照上一页就是错的人啊，错的剂量，错的还有时间那些，就有可能这个是怎么对照的，是会发生哪些错误？大家可以回答。
I think there's one thing I just I'm aware, because I don't know how, if you have kids at home and if these medicines are reachable, it's very dangerous for the young kids. They might get it and they think they're candies and they just take it as candies, and
Yep.
And you will mix with the medicines it's not good for the health either. Yeah. So, yeah, you might just take the wrong one and eat expired medicine and take other people's medicine, and the kids might reach it. So I think all sorts of dangerous things might happen. Yeah, if they mix up. I think it's very important to sort it out and throw out those expired medicines.
Yes, I feel like, Joanna, you could just give this presentation.
Yeah, I think what strikes me most is I think medication need to be precise, and this is just out of control. It's just many things can happen here. So that's just, I mean, I think one just cannot really control their medication under the circumstances, the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, with it being so unorganized, really any of those mistakes could happen. I think probably one of the biggest one is, like Joanna said, of taking the wrong medication, just reaching in there and grabbing the wrong thing because there's so much there. The wrong person. So a kid could get into this and take a medication thinking it's candy, or even just since they're so intermixed, maybe you're trying to give your grandchild a medication that's specific for a child, but you accidentally grab the wrong thing because all of those meds are intermixed by family members with other family members. And then with those expired medications, you could be taking the wrong expired medication instead of what is new and the correct one to use. You could take the wrong dose of a medication. Like sometimes people keep their old prescriptions even though they have changed to a different dose. So it's really easy to take that old medication that's the wrong dose. And then again, also the wrong person can happen in these situations.
所以这个药物可能这样混乱的药柜可能会让你吃错药，或者是尤其你家里有小孩的时候，就可能有孙子啊，或是你想要给孙子吃药，你可能会拿错药物，或是那些孙子可能可以，如果他可以拿这些药的话，他有办法拿到这些药的话，他们可能觉得这是糖果或是什么，就是把它拿去吃掉。对，然后像是如果说你是有过期的药物的话，那可能是已经是旧的药，已经可能换药了，你不知道，你还是吃到旧的药，或是旧的药跟新的药的那个，即使同一种药，但是剂量可能有改变，那你可能就吃到不对的剂量，那有可能这个药不是你的，然后你可能也吃到，以为是你的，也吃错人，就是不同的家庭成员他们吃到的这个药这样子。
Okay, so we have another example here. So what can happen if someone doesn't keep a list of their current medications that they're taking?
如果说他们没有一个药物清单的话，那可能会发生什么样的危害或是药物的错误呢？
I think if someone took the wrong medicine and they might have the unexpected surprise side effects, yeah, that's very dangerous. Can be not good for the heart or blood pressure or other health issues might happen.
Definitely.
Yeah, when I visit the doctors, they always ask a list of current medications, including the vitamins. So, so my answer to this question is, if you don't have a list or don't know what you're taking, the doctors, nurses are at a loss in terms of your condition when they treat you or give you new medicines.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anyone else? So yeah, you covered a lot of it already. And Peter, I would add to yours that in addition to your doctors and nurses having a hard time knowing how to treat you, the Poison Center as well really needs to know what you're taking. Because when you call us, we need to know exactly what medications you're taking and their doses so we can check if there are any interactions, if there could be some bad effects by mixing certain things or by taking more than what you're supposed to of something. So it's really important for us to know as well. So in addition to all of that, really, if you don't have a current list of your medications, you're relying a lot on your memory for taking them. And, sometimes that works just fine and you're able to remember, but a lot of times, especially this year when we're so distracted and stressed, it can be really easy for your memory to not be enough for taking your medication safely. you could take the wrong medication. You could take the wrong dose of your medication, especially if you're taking lots of different medications. It can be easy to mix stuff up. You could take something the wrong way. You could take the wrong person's medication because medications have some complicated names and you might not realize that you're taking your spouse's medication instead of yours. And then it could be easy to mix up what time to take your medication as well.
对，所以刚刚那个 Peter 他讲的就是说他的医院啊，医生会要求他也准备一个清单这样子。那所以准备清单可以让医生跟医护人员知道你的情况。那同时也可以让那个万一发生什么事情打电话到他们这个华盛顿预防中毒的中心的话，那你有个清单，他们也可以帮助你说知道说你到底发生哪些错误。那所以准备清单对这个你打电话到这个 Washington Point Center 也是有帮助的。那当你平常如果说即使你没有清单，你可能觉得自己可以很好的用自己的记忆力啊，就是去提醒自己去吃这些药物，但是可能在今年这个压力很大，或是很多事情让你分心了，那你可能就会开始忘记吃药，或是吃错那个剂量，怎么使用错误这个方式错误，对，那还有时间的问题，所以还是需要建议大家有个药物清单会比较安全，比较好一点。
All right, last example to go through. So what could happen if someone doesn't use a reminder system for their medications?
最后一个问题就是，如果说有些人没有用一些提醒自己吃药的、使用药物的一些系统的话，那会发生什么危害呢
？Forgot to take a medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Overdose.
Take a wrong one.
Take the wrong one.
Overdose.
Overdose. Yep. Yeah, so can happen, but the two I put down here, so the wrong dose, they could take their medications twice, which could lead to overdose if it's a medication that could be harmful that way. And then taking it at the wrong time too. They forget to take their morning pill. They don't remember until the afternoon. So they could take it at the wrong time.
对，所以主要你没有一些提醒你的方法的话，可能你会像刚刚提的，就可能会吃错剂量，然后可能多吃了一次，或是或 overdose 的过量这样，或是你使用时间错误，可能早上要吃没有忘了吃，晚上才吃这样子。
So this should be a really easy question to answer. What should you do first if you think you've had a medication error or if you know that you have made a mistake with your medications?
所以万一你真的使用药物一些错误的话，你应该做什么事？第一件事情该做什么？
Any guesses? Think about where Alex and I work.
I'll call you guys first then.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so give the Poison Helpline a call, talk to one of our nurses or one of our pharmacists. They'll be able to tell you if you're worried that you may have had a medication error, they'll be able to tell you what symptoms to look out for, if it's something that you need to be worried about or not. If you have had a medication error, they'll do the same thing. They'll tell you, is this something that could be harmful? What are those symptoms you need to look out for? Do you need to go into the hospital or not? They'll be able to tell you everything you need to do. And the great thing about the Poison Helpline is, remember, we're open all the time. So you are guaranteed to talk to someone right away instead of trying to call your doctor's office and maybe you're put on hold or you're not able to get a hold of your doctor right away. So it's easy to just call us and we'll take care of you right away.
所以万一发生像刚刚讲的药物错误，可能吃错药，不同的人吃错这个药，或是药物剂量的问题，或是时间的问题，或是 使用方式错误的问题，那你可以第一时间你就可以先打这个电话，就打给他们1800-222-1222，因为这个电话他们是24小时的，不会像你的家庭医生，就是可能要打给他，可能要等很久才可以跟他讲到话。那他们会告诉你怎么处理，那会不会这个是会有什么可能会有什么反应？那你只要把一些资讯跟他们讲，他们也可以跟你说，哎，需不需要去看医生，或是去医院，跟他们告诉你怎么处理这样子。所以请大家记得打这个电话。
Plus, remember, if you do not want to speak English, you can tell them right away that you speak Mandarin, that you want an interpreter. So you'll have access to interpretation.
这个电话有翻译的，你可以跟他要求翻译，所以不用担心。
So Megan, I have a question here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me know if I'm doing something right or wrong. The only medication that is life-threatening for me, or very serious medication, is the blood pressure pills.
Okay.
And I take a few others that are not really like serious stuff. And so if I'm confused whether I take it or not, I usually defaulted to not take it. Just prefer to miss the dose rather than the overdose. So am I doing something right or wrong or what?
You know, I'm not actually able to answer that since I don't know like what medications you're taking, and I'm not a nurse or a pharmacist. I can't answer that. But the next time that happens, you can just call the poison helpline and you can ask them, because I think it probably a lot of times depends on what time you remember, what exactly your medications are. So you can just call them and ask. It doesn't have to be an actual emergency or an actual error for you to call. You can just call and ask for information, ask questions.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, I suggest you buy a medication organizer with Sunday to Saturday. So you put it in a weekly dosage in there. Every time you forgot it, you just take a look of it. Yeah. That's the easiest way to managing yourself.
I do have that still. It's not 100%.
Well, we'll cover a few different things that might help you out there.
May I have a big question?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So when I know you are from the poison center, my first reaction is you were talking about the poisoning things such as opium, heroin, marijuana, or something like that. But now I know you're still dealing with the medication. All we discussed today is talking about the medication, but the users misuse that. For example, overdose, wrong time, wrong kinds, or something like that. All this is made by the fault of the users. Now, I want to ask you another field that's the really poisoning things. For example, it's not a medication. For example, opium and heroin. Why your center don't suggest the legal department say, hey, this is illegal. If you sell or if you buy such kind of the things, the police will catch you and put to you in the court. And also I heard the marijuana now is okay in Washington state. I really don't know why. So can you explain all these questions regarding all these poisoning things? I think this is the most important jobs as a poisoning center to do. Thank you.
Yes, so we do definitely help people who have been using opioids, cannabis, any substance. So hold on to your questions about opioids and opiates because Alex is going to talk about those in just a few slides. So he'll talk about legal prescription opioids as well as illegal opioids like heroin, opium. Cannabis, we're probably not going to, or marijuana, we're probably not going to talk much about that today. Potentially, I don't know, Jerry, if your group would be interested in, we have a cannabis presentation. We could actually at some point give that presentation, and it talks a lot about legality and the history of legality and the movement in Washington to legalize and what's legal, what's not legal. I think that would be a lot to discuss right now. So why don't, Paul, how about we wait until the end, we see how much time we have, and then maybe Alex can give you just an overview of some of the marijuana history and all of that.
Okay, thank you.
I can't help Paul understand. Paul, where you been the last 20 years?
No. You are the authority. I want the answer from the authority. That's the.
They don't have authority to let you use or not. It's you, the person decided. And it's a politician made the law. So
No. If they think that's a harmful things, that's a bad thing to the human being, why not?
Okay. Well, we save to the end. Yeah.
Yeah. This should be answered by the authority.
All right, we can talk a little bit more about it at the end.
好，OK， 刚刚 Peter 翁先生他问的问题是说，就是他万一少吃了一个药怎么办？可不可以就是他通常就是他忘记吃，他就是跳过一次，那你有没有什么问题这样子？那Megan 的回答就是说，你们还是可以打电话到 Washington Point Center， 即使只是你少吃了，就是漏吃了一个药，你也可以打电话给他们，那他们也可以跟你讲说有什么问题，并不一定要非常是紧急的问题才需要打电话问他们，他们可以回答任何相关的问题这样子。那我们今天等一下会讲到鸦片类的药物的一些问题，然后刚刚问一些有关大麻的问题。那如果大家对大麻的药物有兴趣的话，那我们下次之后可以再安排另外一个演讲来讨论这个问题，或是我们今天最后还有时间也会讨论一下。You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Talk a little bit about how you can prevent some of these errors from happening. Okay, so first is to use some sort of physical reminder system. There are lots of different reminder systems that you can use. One great one is a medication calendar. So this can take a lot of different shapes and formats. It could be a checklist like you see here on the left of the slide. We actually put this together at the Poison Center, and I sent it to Jerry with all of the other attachments. So you would write down the name of the medication, and then after you take it, you just check it off. If you don't want a physical paper like this, you could always use your cell phone, use a calendar on your cell phone, or there are a lot of different apps. Like this app here is called MediSafe. It's free and it gives you a reminder to take your medication, and then you check it off on your phone that you've taken it. Or you could just use a paper calendar as well. You could create some little symbol, just a check mark or something when you've taken your medication.
他介绍一些不同的提醒的方法给大家。那第一个就是有一个它叫 medication calendar， 就是一个类似行事历的部分。那你可以打勾啊，说你有没有这个药物有没有吃过，不同的时间有没有吃到，可以打个勾，就是做记号这样子。那也可以用一些现在手机的上面的应用程式。那这个它是介绍叫 MediSafe 的一个免费的应用程式。那有其他很多种，你们可以选择自己喜欢适合你们自己的。 那有些人也会就是只用他简单以前传统的一些纸上的行事历来月历来做记录。那这个 medication calendar 我有这些，我等一下会转给大家。
All right. Or in addition to a calendar or by itself, you could use a pill organizer. So there are lots of different options for this as well. Probably the most simple is just the pill organizers you buy at a pharmacy that just have Sunday through Saturday in a little box, and you just put your pills for the week in that. There are other options that offer even more support than that. So you could talk to your pharmacy and they can actually package your pills all together. So your Monday morning dose, all of those pills would be in one little package together that you would just pop out then. There are fancier pill boxes as well, like the two I have here on the slide. Some of them, they'll actually lock until it's the correct date and time for you to take your medication. Some of them have flashing lights or audio cues to remind you. And if you get into the more advanced ones, oftentimes they'll have a feature where they will call you if you haven't taken your medication yet, or they will call your caregiver.
这个是药盒，就建议大家使用药盒。那你可以有很多不同形式的药盒，那也可以有简单的，那也可以请你的药局的药师，他们有些药局有提供这些服务，可以帮你把每一天每个时间的要吃的药物帮你分好。对，那也有一些更不只是阳春的药盒，有更厉害的，就是更多功能的药盒。像是有可能会把它锁起来，到了那个时间要吃药的时间，它才会打开。然后有的会有一些灯的提示，甚至有一些声音的提示，会可能大家有用过，会一直哔哔哔哔的叫。对，那还有一些可能就是甚至如果你忘了吃的话，它会侦测到你没有吃，然后它会打电话给你本人或是你的照顾者，通知你提醒你要去吃。
Just a reminder, though, that pill organizers are not child-proof. So if you have grandkids that come around or any kids that come to your house, you want to be sure that you're storing these pill boxes up high, out of sight, out of reach of them, since they are very easy to get into and for kids to then take that medication.
这边很重要的一点要提醒大家，就是这个药盒，它并不是就是让小孩子拿不到的一个有一些功能，对，所以当你有药盒的时候，你要特别注意，尤其你有孙子会来你们家，那你就要把它放在他们拿不到的地方，会比较安全一点。
Okay, so then reading medication labels closely is also really important, especially for over-the-counter medications. So you want to be sure that you understand exactly the timing of taking those medications and how much of that medication you can take in a specific time period. So for example, Tylenol or Aleve, a lot of times they have a maximum amount you can take within 24 hours. Like you should only take 3 pills in 24 hours. Otherwise it could be harmful to your body. You also want to closely look at the ingredients of those medications. This is important to prevent double dosing a medication. So a lot of times, a really common one that we hear about is when someone has a cold and they have a lot of different symptoms. So they take some Dayquil because they have a really runny nose and they have a sore throat. But they also have a headache. And so they take some Tylenol to help with their headache. Well, Dayquil already has Tylenol in it. It already has acetaminophen, that's the drug name, in it. So if you take both of those together, you are double dosing that medication, which could be harmful to you.
这边就是建议大家尤其是在非处方药的时候，要特别去注意背后的标签。那第一个就是要注意它是什么时候吃，然后一天可以吃最多可以吃几颗， 像是有一些它都会写说止痛药，它会写说24小时内你可以吃几颗这个药，或是多少的剂量。那当然也要去注意它每一颗这个药物的剂量是多少。那有时候大家会感冒的时候会吃一些感冒药，那感冒药有很多像这个止痛的成分跟 Tylenol 还有这个 Dayquil， 他们都会用这个乙酰氨酚这种成分来来止痛。那可能你不知道，你就一下吃了这个止痛药，又吃了另外一个感冒药，你以为是不同的成分药物，但可能某一个成分你已经吃了过量了，所以大家要注意去阅读这个标签。
Then we talked a lot earlier about leftover medications, so expired medications, unwanted, unneeded medications. You want to get rid of those. So thankfully in Washington, we have a really, really great system to get rid of your medications. So you can go to this website, takebackyourmeds.org, and it will show you all of the different secure medicine return locations in Washington. So a lot of times these are at pharmacies, so maybe a grocery store pharmacy or a Bartell's or your clinic's pharmacy. They could be in sheriff or police departments. And now we also have a lot of places that are offering mail-back envelopes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on this slide. I actually have the website up, which I can show you. So when you go to it, you'll see either a map or a list, so you can choose how you want to search for a location. We also have this website available in different languages. So you could Mandarin and search for everything in Mandarin. Say you live in Auburn and you want to see where locations are, you could either use the map to find it, or you could pull up the list and type in Auburn, and it'll show you where all of these different locations are for you to take back your medications. And they look like mailboxes, and it's always free to just take your meds in, stick them in the slot, and that is the safest way to get rid of them.
当你刚刚提到可能大家会有一些过期的药物、旧的药物，那该怎么做呢？就是可以带到它这个网站，会跟大家讲说有哪些地方可以回收这个药物。那通常它所有药物都会会接受的。那刚刚他有介绍这个网站，那有中文的页面，你们可以点选。那这些地点可能有时候是大部分可能是药局，然后不管是任何药局啊，这是在超市的药局，或者是就是普通的药局，或者是药妆店那种药局。那还有警察局也会有。或是不同的一些可能 center 可能都会有，中心都会有。
Okay, so you see on the slide, there's all these green envelopes. So those are places that you can pick up mail back envelopes. So say you don't live close to an actual disposal site, or you don't want to physically go there. You can pick up an envelope and you can mail back your medications in that envelope. It's a little bit more restricted than the actual it's a little bit more restricted than the actual disposal locations. They won't accept vitamins or supplements or any illicit drugs, but it can be a really good, easy option for people who might not be able to get out of the house as much. So you can pick up those envelopes at like a library or whatever is listed, or you can go to this website, medproject.org, and they'll send you a mail-back envelope for free.
对，另外一个选项就是你可以寄回去。那寄回去的话，就是在不同的点，他们会设计像是这样，可能不同的信箱来收你的药物，过期的药物。但是这边的话，不能收一些维他命啊、补充品啊，还有一些非法的药物等等。所以大家寄的时候就直接拿到这边放进去就可以了。对，那可能好像是可以跟上这个网站，然后去看是不是要拿特别的那个信封来跟他寄回去。
Alrighty, so then other recommendations, always store your medications separate from those of other family members or your pets. So that could be in a completely separate location, or maybe separate shelves, Or if that's not possible, you can use some kind of visual cue to really clearly differentiate between people. So I have on this slide, you can use colored bands. They have actual fancy pill bottle bands you can buy. You don't have to do that. You could use rubber bands. You could color the caps different colors. One person has blue, the other person has yellow, or you could even use different colored pill boxes.
所以怎么让在不同的家庭成员之间可以知道自己的药物是怎么使用的？那如果最好的话，当然可以分不同的地方摆放，不同的柜子摆放，但是没办法，只能放在一起，空间不够的话呢，可以用一些颜色的提示啊，像是这个发圈或是橡皮圈这样子，可以放在你的药盒上，用不同颜色代表不同的人，或是不同的药盒也用不同的颜色来代表不同的人，那这样比较容易就不会搞混。
All right, and my last slide here before we turn it over to Alex is to always safely store those medications out of sight and out of reach, especially if you have little kids that might be around your household. That is the #1 rule, to keep it out of sight and out of reach of kids, but we also really recommend that you lock up your medications. So especially if there's some of the more what we call high alert meds like opioids, cannabis, antidepressants, any sort of sedatives. Those can be really dangerous if they're used by the wrong person, especially little kids. So we recommend getting a medication lockbox or having a lock on your medicine cabinet to make sure that you're the only one getting into those medications and you're keeping everyone safe around you.
最后给大家建议就是建议，尤其有小朋友的时候，你就是要把那个药物摆放好，那甚至把它上锁，尤其是一些比较需要注意的一些药物啦，像是鸦片类的药物啊、大麻类啊，或是一些镇静剂、一些抗忧郁的药物，对，那这些都可能对一些就是如果说你不是要使用的人，对他们可能会造成一些比较多的危害，这样子。对，所以要特别注意，甚至把它锁起来，就是大家可以想想看的。
And I know sometimes, especially with older adults, we hear that it can be hard to remember to take your medications when they're locked up. So we have a couple different recommendations. You can either keep a week's worth of your medications out in your pill box or something, or put something that you regularly use with your medications locked up, like your toothbrush. If you lock your toothbrush in there, you're probably going to remember to get into that cabinet to brush your teeth in the morning and to have your medications.
大家可能会怕说把药锁起来会忘了吃，所以可能也可以你就是把你1周要吃的份先拿出来，然后把多的份先锁起来，这样比较可以避免过量。那也可以就是把你要平常用的一些用品跟药物一起锁起来，像是你每天都要刷牙，你把牙刷跟你的药物一起锁起来，那你就不想去开这个柜子，然后就不会忘记去开这个柜子去吃药了，因为你一定要刷牙这样子。
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Alex now, and he's going to talk a little bit about opioids and opiates.
Megan, can I ask a question, please?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's one area that I'm always unsure of is the vitamin and supplements. So I wonder if there's such thing as like vitamin overdose, and whether you guys cover that at all.
Yeah, yep, you can very much overdose on vitamins. A lot of times people don't realize that vitamins can be dangerous if they're used incorrectly. A lot of times people think they're natural, so they're safe, but yes, you could overdose on vitamins. Vitamins and supplements can interact with your prescription medications or your over-the-counter medications. I think we have this in this opioid section to always have a medication list. So you want to be sure that you keep your medications, list all of your medications, list all of your vitamins and supplements on that list. Tell your doctor that you're taking them. Make sure you know the appropriate dose to take.
对 ，Peter 刚刚问的问题就是说，你会不会吃维他命，会不会过量这样子？那这是有可能的。那他还是建议大家可以把你的药物清单，不只是你的处方药，然后这些非处方药，还有一些维他命这些补充品，也要把它写下来。那给你的医生看，那你的医生就会判断说会不会有一些交互作用啊，会不会有一些过量的问题，他会帮你看。
Again.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, one more question. Since we talk about a vitamin or the supplement overdose, do you have any common overdose vitamin or supplement? If you don't, can you bring back a list or something next time?
I don't even know if it's possible for us to have a common list of vitamins and supplements that could lead to overdose because it's so highly dependent on the person, the other medications they're taking, their health conditions. I can look around and I can see if I can send Jerry something. But really, my advice to you would be if you're worried about it, if you're taking a vitamin or supplement, call the poison helpline, tell them all the medications you're taking, any health conditions you have, and they can advise you on what could potentially be dangerous or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in the or poison center in a position to give advice in terms of potentially harmful supplements?
No, so Alex and I cannot give you any sort of treatment advice because we are not nurses or pharmacists. We don't actually work in our call center. We just provide education. So you're going to have to call if you have any specific questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you ever do call the poison center, it will not be Megan or I answering. You don't want us answering because we wouldn't be as helpful in that situation. All right, any other questions before we move on to hone in more on opioids and opiates?
接下来会讲就是有关鸦片类的一些药物的问题。那大家还没有其他的问题？有关就是药物管理的问题，在我们往下继续之前。
没有。
No, yeah, we are, yeah, we.
Jerry 啊，你可不可以请他解释他现在写的这2个字？
他会
实际上有什么？
等一下会解释。
好的。
Okay, yeah, we are good to go.
All right, perfect. So, yeah, let's hone in on some opioids and opiates now. Next slide, Megan. Perfect. So, opioids, very generally, it's a very large class of drugs and substances that interact with what we call opioid receptors. And these receptors are located on nerve cells throughout the body and the brain. They're kind of everywhere in the body and the brain. Now, examples of opioids and opiates, we'll distinguish those on the next slide. These include drugs that are prescribed by your healthcare providers. So that could be a doctor or a pharmacist. It also includes prescriptions that are misused or illicitly taken. So these would include prescriptions themselves that someone is using incorrectly or that they're using a prescription that's not for them. This also includes, as you were alluding to earlier, Paul, other illegal substances, heroin, for example. Heroin's not a prescription opioid. Now, I want to make this point, and I'm going to make this point a lot today, that all opioids, it doesn't matter if it's legal, illegal, how someone accesses it, all of these opioids interact with the same parts of the body, the same receptors, and they influence all sorts of different substances. How we perceive pain, they influence our sense of hunger and thirst, and even our mood. And it doesn't matter how legal one of these is, it's going to interact in the same parts of the brain and the body.
好，所以什么是鸦片类的药剂呢？那这些药物的话，可能就是它们全部会在我们身体里面有一种就是 opioid 的一个受体，那可能就是我们的神经啊，或者在我们的大脑啊，还有身体里面有这个神经细胞里面有这个受体。 那我们只要吃了这些药物，它会作用在这些受体上面。那这些可能有些，这可能的来源就是你的医生给你的，或是有一些处方药，但是被误用，或是大家违法的去拿，或是当然有一些就是非法的药物的一些物质。对，那这边再强调一点，就是所有的这些是同样的鸦片类的一些化学药物啊、药品啊，都是在同样的受体上面来产生作用，会对你一些可能会让你就是同样的反应一样啊，就是那种可能你会觉得口渴啊，或是渴望啊，或是你想会兴奋啊，或是那些反应会是一样的，因为它作用在你身体的那些同样的受体上面。
Now, I'm not going to linger on this slide for too long. I do want to make the point, though, that there is technically a distinction between opiates and opioids. Now, an opiate is basically a type of this drug, or a type of drug that is more natural. So it's derived from the poppy plant or from opium. And there's less processing involved. So that could be morphine or codeine or heroin. Now, an opioid is at least somewhat synthetic. That means that there's more processing that goes into it. There's more work in the lab, if you will. But again, even if they're synthetic, they operate and attach to the same parts of the brain and body, and thus can have some similar risks. I will say that the more synthetic any substance is, opioids or other substances, typically the more powerful they are, the longer lasting, the longer they're going to hold on to that part of the cell in the brain and the body.
好，刚刚 Peter 有问的问题啊，就是什么是 OPA 或是 OPOA？ 那OPA 就是它比较自然的一种来源。那它尤其是有一些药物直接从鸦片类的那个来直接萃取的一些鸦片剂，像是吗啡啊、codeine、可待因还有海洛因，它们都是从那个鸦片这个植物比较自然直接萃取出来的。那OPOA 就是一些鸦片类的一些药物的话，它们是可能经过化学的合成。它可能有半合成的，就是在中间这个是一些半合成的，那还有完全合成，就是完全从那个实验室做出来的。对，那不管它的来源是什么，那它们都同样的作用在同样我们的身体的一些受体上面，一样会有造成一样的反应。那这边如果说你怎样是最强最厉害的一些药物呢？就是它可以在你的身体里面跟你的那个受体作用最久的。有持续效应连接最久的话，就是最强的一种药物。
A quick question, Alex.
Yes.
So of the two, are both big problems at the moment, or one is worse than the other?
That is a really good and really complicated question, because there are so many factors. So I feel like the best way to answer that really is it depends. It depends on who's taking it. It depends on how much they're taking, because you look at opiates. Some of these are totally legal. Morphine is used in clinical settings all the time. Heroin is not. And then when you look at opioids, some are illicit, some are legal. So it's very difficult when you're looking at legality, when you're looking at how synthetic something is, how powerful something is, to say what is most dangerous. In terms of acute short-term toxicity, generally the more synthetic something is, the more powerful it is. So there is some extra concern in for overdose for those more powerful synthetic opioids. I hope that answers your question all right.
Yes, thank you.
So those need a doctor prescription, right?
Yeah. All right. Now for prescription opioids, we're just talking about what's prescribed on this slide. Typically, if someone's prescribed an opioid, it's specifically to treat pain. and generally pretty intense pain, moderate to severe. This happens a lot following a surgery, following an injury. My dog right now just had abdominal surgery and she's on codeine. So it's a very common prescription. We also see it following certain health conditions like cancer, because there can be a lot of pain associated with cancer, as well as end-of-life care. Now, this is a bit of a tricky realm here. We're starting to see more and more and more over time prescription opioids being used for chronic pain. So that's long lasting rather than just healing from an injury. It's something like chronic back pain or arthritis, something that's not necessarily going to go away quickly. What's difficult with that is opioids, while they're really, really powerful and effective at treating short-term pain, the effectiveness for long-term pain is really uncertain. There's a lot of very mixed and limited evidence for that. And there's additional risks for addiction. We'll speak to addiction and dependence just very briefly here in the next these next sections.
OK， 所以这一类的处方药，鸦片类的处方药是通常以前是常常是用在就是处理一些中度还有重度比较严重的一些疼痛的时候，那通常有可能是你当有做手术或是做有一些受伤之后，像甚至你的宠物有做一些手术，那可能他也会使用这些药物在你的宠物的狗上面。那还有一些癌症病患或是最后安宁疗护的阶段的话，也可能会使用这类药物。那在近期的话，越来越多人使用在一些慢性疼痛、长期的慢性疼痛上面。但因为目前的研究还没有很多证据显示说这类药物对长期的一些疼痛的效果是有用的。因为通常这个是比较短期的效果，所以而且还会有一些上瘾的一些依赖的一些风险，对，所以要大家请多注意一下。
All right, so some common prescription opioids, and I mentioned this earlier that opioids can be prescribed in a lot of different settings. So they can come from your main doctor, your primary care provider. They can also come from a specialist, so for a specialty care provider. They can also come from a dentist or an oral surgeon. And I think that's something a lot of folks forget, that if you have oral surgery or get wisdom teeth pulled or something like that, it's very likely that you'd be prescribed an opioid to help with that pain. Now, some of the really common ones would be hydrocodone. That's Vicodin is the brand name. Oxycodone or Oxycontin is the brand name. This is probably the most notorious one. It has a lot of the larger notoriety attached to it. With the opioid epidemic. And then we have a few others. So oxymorphone, I mentioned morphine earlier, and tramadol. Now tramadol is kind of interesting because outside of the United States, tramadol really is the leading prescribed opioid. And I believe hydrocodone right now is the most commonly prescribed in the US.
OK， 所以这些药物可能会有不同的医生开给你，可能你的家庭医生或是专科医生，甚至牙医有可能因为他也会开这个药物给你。对，那这右边这边下面是一些常见的药物的一些名字，那左边可能是它的成分名，右边括号里面就是它的那个药品的名字。对，那他们刚刚提到吗啡就是 morphine， 还有tramadol 可能中文翻译可能是叫什么曲马多或是舒痛停。那在美国以外的话，这个是比较多使用的一个药物。对。
All right, so I do want to draw some special attention to fentanyl. Fentanyl is extremely powerful. It is a full synthetic opioid. So again, synthetic means it's more likely to hold on to that cell for longer and to last longer with very powerful effects. It is a prescription opioid. We see it in illicit marketplaces as well, but first and foremost, it is a prescription. And it's approved for treating extremely severe pain. Now you see these two pictures here. There are two different routes of administration. through prescribed fentanyl. The one up top is a patch. So that's like a, a big Band-Aid or something that is attached to your arm or something like that. There's also a lozenge. That's that picture below, and it looks kind of like a strange lollipop. So you'd suck on that until it was gone. Now, I said a moment ago, fentanyl, it's appearing in illicit ways as well, and it is very tied to overdose, whether those overdoses are result in death or not. We're starting to see it, or we have been seeing it, mixed into other substances that are used illicitly. So some folks may try adding a little fentanyl to heroin to make it more powerful. We also see it mixed with cocaine sometimes. And then there are counterfeit, so fake oral prescriptions of fentanyl as well.
OK， 那它这个药物是叫芬太尼，中文叫芬太尼或是芬坦尼。OK， 它这个药物非常的强力的，是一种非常强力的药物，它是合成的，那专门就是用在处理非常痛的、非常严重的痛上面。对，那它有2种剂型，一种是贴片的，贴在你的手臂上，那另外一种就是很像下面这个，有点像它是一个很像棒棒糖或者什么，就是你可以去舔它，然后舔到它没有。对，那通常会发生一些严重的伤害，用这个药物的话，通常都是跟一些违法使用有关。他们可能会跟那个海洛因啊、cocaine 这些非法的药物、毒品混杂来使用，对，那就会造成致命的危险。
All right, so talking about Poison Center calls to the Poison Center about opioids. Let's do some definitions first. So we've used this term overdose a couple times. You all have thrown out the term overdose a couple times when answering Megan's questions earlier. But what does that mean? So overdose generally refers to injury or poisoning that happens to the body when any drug is taken in excessive amounts. So overdoses can be fatal. They can also be non-fatal. Folks may die from an overdose. They may live through an overdose. Overdoses can also be intentional or unintentional. So Megan walked us through all these different possible ways in which you can have a medication error. So someone could take additional medication by mistake and result in an overdose. And then someone could be using intentionally for other reasons and have it end up in an overdose.
OK， 所以就是你们可以当你有那个使用过量的话，可以打到他们的中心去询问这个有关这个问题。那什么是过量呢？药物过量的话，就是可能就是让你的身体就是摄取太多这种药物，就是超过量，就叫药物过量嘛。那这些药物过量有可能是致命的，或是不是致命的，也有可能是故意的，或是不小心的。就像我刚刚前面讲到一些药物管理的问题，导致你吃错药，然后吃错剂量，时间的问题啊，还有方式的问题，这样子。
All right, so this is some of our data. These are calls to the Poison Center from 2020, from last year, and some of the different reasons that folks call us for opioid exposure. And then we also have it organized into age groups. Now, I will say that calls to the Poison Center are totally voluntary. So this is likely an underrepresentation of the total number of cases in the state of Washington. Jerry, I might have you go for that, and then I'll go a little further.
Yeah. 他们这个资料是他们中心他们收集的，就是看他们打电话的人来收集的一些资料。那这些资料的话，可能没办法代表整个华盛顿州，因为他可能并不是，他可能没有讲出他的实情这样子，那都给大家一个参考。那他们还分了不同的年龄啊，来看这个资料，等下会跟大家解释。
Thank you. All right, so we've got all the colors happening here. The blue you see, these are cases that are suspected to be tied to suicide or self-harm. Orange, intentional misuse. This is a bit of an odd category. This is where someone is intending to use a substance, but they don't follow the directions exactly. So say they're in a lot of pain and they decide they want to take more than what's prescribed, that would be an intentional misuse. Anytime you see the term abuse for poison center data, we're talking about someone who's seeking intoxication. So someone who's trying to get high or drunk. Then therapeutic error, that's that green bar there. That's just a medication error. So unintentional error there. And then this final category, which there's very little data on, that red bar, that's a withdrawal. So someone who's going through withdrawal symptoms. We won't go into withdrawal too much right now.
我们解释一下，就是不同颜色代表的不同标签代表的那个类型。那第一个蓝色标签就是有可能想要有些人想要用这些药物来伤害自己、自杀这样子。那橘色标签的话，就是故意的去误用。那怎么是故意的误用呢？就是你可能觉得很痛，然后你想要多吃一点药物，你知道你自己为了这个要减轻痛，然后而多吃点药物，那这个就是你故意的去误用这个药物。那再来灰色的部分就是 abuse 的部分，就是你就大部分他们在中心他们会用这个词的话，就是可能有一些吸毒的人，他们要让他们自己兴奋啊什么的，所以他们就会把它归类在这一部分。那绿色的部分就是刚刚我们前面提到的一些药物管理，就是使用药物错误的问题，对，吃到错的人，然后错的时间、错的剂量这些。那 withdraw 的话，就是有些人可能他要戒掉这个药物，那他可能会有一些问题，他们也会打给他，但是我们不会谈太多这个问题。
All right. We could spend the entire rest of our time just talking about the data here, but we got to move on. But the one thing I will say before we move to the next slide is just that the most common exposure reason for older adults is that therapeutic error, is the possibility for a medication error there. So that's why we wanted to show this, is to demonstrate the need for a lot of the tips that Megan walked us through earlier.
所以这张图表的重点就是在右边这两个成人的部分，绿色的部分是最多人发生问题的，就是这个绿色，就是使用药物方式错误啊的问题。所以就是我们刚刚前面讲的一些技巧，可以帮助大家来预防不要使用药物方式使用错误这样子。
Alex, quick question on this slide. Can you explain this therapeutic error? Is it more from a user side or from the health giver's side?
Generally, it's going to be the user side. There is the possibility that there was a misprint on the label or something like that. So if there was anything like that, then I guess it could fall under the oh, go ahead, Megan.
Actually, no, this is only user error. If it was a health
only user
making a mistake or a pharmacist making a mistake, it would be an entirely separate category that we don't have listed on this. So these are all older adults who are making the error themselves.
This is why we're presenting this together, because she was able to intervene right there. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, I explain to them first. So 刚刚绿色部分就是主要就是刚刚前面讲的药物使用，个人使用药物错误部分，对，再次跟大家厘清一下。
All right, thank you again for that, Megan. Coding is not always my strong suit. All right, so if you witness an opioid overdose, what should you do? And this is an instance where we would say to just call 911, to not call the poison center, but call 911 immediately. Anytime someone is unconscious or not breathing, if you call to the poison center, we would just tell you to call 911. So those are the occasions where you shouldn't call us, and you should just directly call 911 so paramedics can get involved.
如果说你有看到一个人，他可能有使用 opioid 鸦片类药物过量的话，那第一个时间就是要打给911，打911这样子。
All right, so checking for signs of overdose. If you call 911, they would likely walk you through this as well. But you should check to see if the individual is breathing or whether they're not breathing at all or breathing very, very slowly. You should see if you can wake them up or not, because if they're non-responsive, that can be very concerning. You should also check their skin. If it's cold, if it's clammy, or if it's turning blue, that likely means that they're not getting enough oxygen.
所以他911可能会请你就是去检查，或是你也可以去检查，就是这些征兆了。就是他是有没有呼吸，或是他呼吸的非常缓慢，那可不可以把他叫醒？可能昏迷啊，很严重。那他的皮肤有没有是不是冷啊，鸡皮疙瘩这样子，或是甚至有缺氧的情况，可能有蓝色的皮肤这样子。
All right, and then finally, if you have it on you, you can administer naloxone or Narcan. We're going to describe that on this next slide here.
如果他刚好身边有这个 naloxone， 就是一种药物的话，你可以把它施打这个药物救他。
Now, short of calling 911, Narcan is one of the best things you can do for an opioid overdose. It is in of itself a synthetic opioid, but it doesn't lead to intoxication. It doesn't lead to any harmful effects. What it does is it helps reverse an opioid or opiate overdose. And the way it works is by, it has what we call a stronger cell affinity than a lot of other opioids and opiates, because it's a synthetic. So it kind of kicks the other opioid off that receptor and holds on for a time.
这类药物它也是用合成的。那通常它的作用是可以使那个使用过量的话，它可以把它反转过来。那它的原理是什么？就是它也是作用在同样的受体上面。那它这个受体它就会把别的可能你之前使用的药物，它已经有一些过量的药物，它已经接受在这些刚刚前面讲的这些受体上面。那这个药物进去之后，它可以把这些前面的东西赶走，前面的物质赶走，然后它就贴在你的它的受体上面，那就可以使这个作用比较减缓这样子。
Now, one of the coolest parts of naloxone or Narcan is that it's completely safe, even if there's no overdose, even if there's no opioids in the system. So I have no opioids in me right now, and if I administered Narcan to myself, I wouldn't feel anything. I would be completely fine. Now, it can be administered in a couple ways. There's an injection, so a big syringe, that's the picture in the middle there, and then there's also a nose spray, which is a lot easier and less intimidating to administer.
这边提到就是这个是非常安全的一种药物。甚至你没有过量，你也去使用的药物也不会有事情，也不会有任何反应呢。对，那还有2种施打的方式，第一种就是透过鼻子，可以用吸的，那另外一种就是注射的，那不论是静脉注射或是肌肉注射都可以。Peter， 你没有 mute yourself。
Sorry.
No problem. All right, so the last thing I'll say on this slide, there are some limitations, even though it's very amazing and helpful. Sometimes folks will need multiple doses, and it may not last in the system as long as the other opioid will. So someone may come out of an overdose and then half an hour later start to slip back in. This is why it's so important, even if you administer Narcan, to still call 911, because then the paramedics can intervene and take it from
there. 所以这个药物，其实我在电影上面有看过，就是他们就会演，就是他们尤其他们亲人知道的话，他们就会直接使用这个药物。对，那所以如果有的话，可以使用这个药物，然后等那个911的人来用。对。
Alex, so does this one need a prescription?
Great question. So yes and no. I think we've got a slide toward the end. Do we in this one, Megan? Okay, cool. We got a slide on how to get it a little later on. So you're setting me up for a few minutes from now.
Okay.
好，所以刚刚这个等一下会解释说这种怎么取得这个药物，对 ，OK，好。
And it looks like there's a question here in the chat box.
Yeah, it's about medication management. So maybe we can answer later.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so we'll hold on to that. Thank you. All right, so what else to do during an opioid overdose? So even with Narcan, even with calling 911, it can be incredibly helpful to administer rescue breathing or chest compression. So CPR, basically, because one of the biggest concerns is we want oxygen that's there to circulate still. If the individual does not wake up after 2 to 5 minutes after administering naloxone, you can administer a second dose. And then, as always, with any emergency, staying with that individual until help arrives can save their life.
OK， 对，所以当发生什么事情的话，就是可以继续检查，就是他的就是做一些 CPR， 就是心肺复苏术继续检查，就是让他有呼吸啊，还有压他的胸。那再来就是刚刚如果说你已经有打让他使用第一根刚刚那个药物的话，你可以使用第二次。那如果说他们在2到5分钟之内还没有2到5分钟之后还没有醒来的话，可以使用第二次。那再来就是就你最好是跟他们待到最后啦，就等到他们有医生那个救护车来才可以离开，或是就是要等到比较安全。那刚刚提到就是说刚刚这个救命的药物的话，它是通常会比较快的跟身体做一些反应。那通常而且你需要非常多的不同的次数才可以去解决这个问题。对，因为它可能我去查资料，它是说它比较容易，它的效用比较短啦，它没办法像其他的鸦片类的物质可以作用这么长，所以它可能一下作用完就没了，那必须马上再打第二次。Okay.
I lied. There's no slide on naloxone, so
Yep.
Go for it, Alex.
I just looked as well, so we happened to exclude that slide from this particular slide deck. Apologies for that. So to answer your question, Peter, you can get a direct prescription, but there's also what we call a standing order in the state of Washington, which means that it's basically a prescription for the entire state. So anyone can go to a pharmacist and purchase Narcan or naloxone. Sometimes it's covered by insurance, sometimes it's not. So some folks may need to pay out of pocket to carry it. There's also, this depends on the area, depends on where you are. There are local groups, coalitions, needle exchanges, things like that will often be able to give you a couple doses for free. And so if folks have more specific questions on that, feel free to let us know in the chat box. We might be able to just email that out, that one slide we're talking about that has some of those resources there.
Yeah, I can't help thinking that, since this is kind of like overdose first aid, where the abusers may tend to stock it up just in case. I mean, is that happening, or?
To my knowledge, there's not any sort of concern of like low supply of naloxone or Narcan. And I think generally most public health entities are going to encourage pretty much everyone to carry Narcan on them if they can, if they happen to, come across someone who may be experiencing an overdose, but especially for folks who are using opioids, period, whether that use is illicit or legal, or it's from a prescription. And the Poison Center definitely supports that messaging as well. Because for us, if someone calls us with a potential exposure or overdose to opioids or another substance, we're not going to ask them questions about where they got it or how legal it is or anything like that. Well, all we want to do in that moment is help reduce harm, is to help them from having that substance harm them.
So I didn't quite get it. So it's just really kind of like over the counter, sounding like it's very easy to get.
It is generally easy to get, but you can't buy it like you could Tylenol. Like, so it's not, you still have to go through a pharmacist to get it. Generally, sometimes there are exceptions. And there are, if anyone's curious, we'll have this in the little slide we send out to folks. Narcan's website, and I believe the Red Cross, their website, they have instructions and like online tutorials and little classes on how to use it, as well as recommendations on where to access it.
Okay, I'm just really thinking like it's still kind of a serious stuff where, let's say if you approach a pharmacist to get it, they have all kinds of questions for you before they give it to you.
No, and it wouldn't, from a pharmacist perspective, it would just be like, all right, sure, here we go. Then we'd have to worry about the billing and all that, depending on the individual. But it's not going to set off a red flag. They're not going to call the cops and be like, hey, you got to watch this guy because they're using opioids or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. That's a great question.
所以刚刚那个 Peter 的问题就是他是问说就是怎么样可以取得？那本来说有一个投影片有在讲这个，但是后来查了，就是他们今天没有放进来。那怎么可以取得刚刚那个救命的药物呢？你可以去药局跟药师拿，或是有一些健康的一些帮助大家的中心，他们也会发放，有可能有一些发放。对，那刚刚讲的就是，其实我在刚刚提到电影我看过啦，就是可能有一些妈妈青少年他就直接去药局买了，他们也不会问你什么问题，但主要就是你要怎么付钱啊，保险有没有给付的问题，对，那自己不用担心，就是可以去买，有些可能他亲人有在使用一些，他知道他亲人在吸毒，或是他有使用一些药物的这些类似的药物，那他可以自己去准备，也是随时可以救命的。
All right. Thank you for the questions, folks. You're all asking just excellent questions. I am going to have to go a little faster just to make sure we get through everything. We've got some more information we want you to know, but we'll do our best to answer your questions toward the end. All right. So just kind of summarizing how to prevent overdose. One of the best things to do is read the label and follow the instructions, and really to stick to those instructions very precisely, to not take any medication, but opioids in particular, in greater amounts or more frequently, more often than prescribed. We always encourage you to, or we always recommend to let your doctor know about any side effects or concerns. Anything you weren't expecting, let them know. And also tell them if a medication's not working. You can always, again, you can always talk to your pharmacist. You can always talk to the poison center about those symptoms as well. And a final reminder, we really encourage everyone, if you can, to carry naloxone with you or have it in your home, especially if anyone in your home is prescribed opioids.
就是所以重点就是要怎么预防过量。那当你有这一类药物的话，你当然就是要非常遵守这些医生给你的指示，然后要看清楚这个你吃的药物的一些标签。有没有吃对啊？就是吃对药物这样子，那就是千万不要就是吃过量的。对，那如果你有什么问题，跟你的医生讨论。当你有可能有一些副作用啊，或是一些你担心的问题的话，对，然后觉得这个药物没有用的话，也跟你的医生谈论。对，如果说就是你真的有在使用这些药物，也可以这一类的药物的话，也可以准备一个这个救命的药物在你家里，或是随身带在你的身上。
All right, so just a little bit on interaction. So Megan mentioned this a bit earlier. So an interaction occurs whenever you've got different substances that combine and create different concerning effects. Now, opioids are particularly concerning when they interact with other substances that cause drowsiness. So we have a few listed here. Alcohol, benzodiazepine, but there are plenty of others. and so we encourage folks to exercise those medication management strategies and make sure that your doctor, your pharmacist are all aware of all the medications and substances you take in order to prevent any sort of interaction.
它会有这些药物会跟尤其非常危险，当你在同时又使用一些物质、一些药物的话，会让你觉得有点昏昏的那种昏昏欲睡的那种感觉，像是酒精啊一些什么肌肉松弛剂啊，或是一些抗忧郁的药物，或是精神镇静剂之类的。那你要跟一样，就跟你的医生提说你有使用哪些药物，那他会帮你注意这样子。
I just wanted to add something on this slide that if you are taking an opioid or an opiate, the common side effects can make it even harder to manage your medications. So in addition to the concerns for interactions that Alex talked about, a lot of times opioids will make you sleepy, or they might make you a bit more confused. They can even make your vision worse. And so it's even more important that you use like that medication calendar, the pill box, etc., to keep you on top of your medications, to make sure you're taking them safely, because opioids are going to try to work against that ability to take them safely.
Thank you for adding that, Megan. Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Yeah. So 所以他们刚刚那个提醒就是说，当你吃了这些药物之后，你可能会有一些昏昏欲睡啊，或是困惑的一些问题啊，所以你要非常注意，对，那所以要非常注意，你可能你吃了这些药物，反正会去吃错药啊，或者什么，所以要特别注意一下。
All right. So just kind of summing up some of what a lot of the medication management strategies Megan mentioned earlier. We talked about medication lists, pill organizers, the calendars, the checklists. There's this final resource that we have right here that you can print off. And this is really a tool designed to help you understand what you're taking. So these are questions you can ask your provider, your doctor, your pharmacist to make sure that you understand all you need to know about any of your medications or supplements.
这是一个10个问题的一个工具啦。那它可以帮你去询问说你就是这个药物啊是吃什么怎么用的，然后可以帮助。但是这个我们会转给大家。
All right, final slide of the opioids and opiates section here, and it's just sort of opioids and really all medications. There's such a delicate balance with the use of them, and opioids in particular can be incredibly helpful and very effective at that short-term pain management, especially when they're managed properly by providers, by pharmacists, and the user themselves. We do want to recognize, though, that there's always the potential that someone will use them incorrectly, that someone will use them when they shouldn't, and that can lead to a lot of complications, especially in the long term. And there is a concern with addiction, where your body and brain starts to rely on this substance or series of substances, even when there is no more pain that it needs to treat. So we just want everyone to follow the instructions exactly as laid out in any prescriptions that you get.
他们提到就是这类鸦片类的药物，它也是有非常久的历史，已经使用上，就是在人类历史上也使用有一阵子了。那就是但是这是一个非常脆弱的平衡啊，因为可能会有一些危害啊、上瘾的问题。对，那大家就是尽量就是只要多遵守那些医生指示啊，然后就比较不容易发生问题，然后使用一些药物管理的技巧。那大家就比较不容易发生这些危险。
All right, so we have one last quick section that I want to get through. So if you have any questions about opioids, let's save them until the end and we'll address them then. I wanted to first just share with you a tool that we developed so you can assess your ability to manage your medications and if you maybe need to implement some safety strategies.
在最后还有一小段就是怎么样评估你的药物管理的一些方式。那等下最后有问题的话，我们可以再问。
So I sent these resources to Jerry, so he'll send them out to you. There's 2 resources. There is a self-assessment guide and a strategies guide.
这些资料有一些有2个表格，那等一下我都有收到，我等一下会转寄给大家。
So the first is the self-assessment guide. So this breaks up medication management into 3 categories: safe medication storage, medication knowledge, and then your use of medication management strategies. So this guide, it's going to prompt you through a lot of questions to look at your environment and to look at your practices to see what you're currently doing with your medications.
这个工具会主要有3大项，第一个就是你的储存的问题，还有一些知识的问题，还有一些药物管理的技巧。那这个工具就是会请你去检视你们家里的环境，然后这些问题，然后帮助你去改善你的一些药物管理的方法。
Okay, so let's look at an example. So you see here on the far left, there are prompts, and this is under the category of safe medication storage. It asks you questions like, do you take all of the medications you have, or are some of those leftover medications from previous prescriptions, or are some of them expired or unneeded or unwanted?
像这个表格，它就会问几个问题，然后可能你就会用这个绿色啊、红色来回答，像是说你有没有吃你全部的药啊，或是有没有一些过期的药物之类的等等。
So you'll see that there is a stoplight here up at the top, and that stoplight is how you assess the safety of that practice.
所以那个颜色就代表不同的一些情况，就是对你来讲。
So a green light practice is, it's all good. You're good. You don't need to change anything. A yellow light means, this could be unsafe. This could lead to medication errors. And a red light means this practice is placing you at really high risk of having a medication error.
所以绿色的话就代表说你做得很好，很棒。那黄色的话就是说你可能有可能有一些有可能有几率会造成一些药物使用的不当的问题。那红色的话就是像红绿灯，红色的话就是你非常有高危险会产生一些错误，那必须要赶快改变。
So if we look at that example again, green light means I already take all these medications. I don't have any leftover medications, don't have any expired. So I'm good, don't need to do anything. But then maybe you have leftover meds, expired meds. That would be a red light here.
所以像这个表格，绿色的话可能就说，我吃了所有的药，然后我没有那些过期的药物。那红色边就是我有一些过期的药物，或是我不需要的药物，那可能要赶快去处理。
So if you have any yellow or red light practices, you can then use the strategies guide, and it will tell you all of the different medication management strategies. Most of those strategies we've gone through today. It'll tell you what you need to implement to make sure you can change those red practices into green light practices.
所以另外一个工具就是它会教大家一些方法，有什么策略可以。当你有黄灯或者红灯的时候，有什么策略可以让它更安全
？Great. Okay, I think I'm going to skip this section just so that we have time for questions, but it essentially just tells you what to expect when you call us. We've already gone through this last time I spoke with you, so we'll just skip to the end. I'll leave our email addresses up here too. Go ahead, Jerry.
我们最后还有15分钟，所以我们把时间留给我们问问题，因为可能前面他最后一段的话是说打给他们会有发生什么事情。 但是我们之前可能解释过了，所以我们把时间留给问问题。
So we can take some questions now. I'll first talk about the one that's in the chat box about dampness and heat regarding medications, if they spoil them. So it really depends on the medication. Typically, what's recommended is to keep your medications outside of your bathroom. You don't want to keep them in your bathroom because when you shower, it can get a lot hotter. It can be a lot more humid in your bathroom. And that could, for some medications, it could not really spoil them, but it could make them less effective. So you want to keep your medications outside of the bathroom.
所以有关摆放的问题，就是希望大家不要把它放在浴室里面，因为可能有一些湿气啊什么的问题，还有温度的问题。
Any other questions? Go ahead and type them in the chat box or.
So yeah, another question in the chat box is like a child have like adult medication, what happened? So I think besides calling you, I think if they call you, like you will respond in like 1 minute, right?
Yeah, I think right now our average is 20 seconds before you get to talk to someone. So it's very quick.
Yeah, so they don't need to do anything between. So just call you and you will tell them how to deal with that.
Yep. It is really helpful if you or a child gets into something to have the bottle or the container of whatever that substance is. So then you can tell us exactly what the substance was. Because for example, like a cleaning product, if you tell us my grandchild took a sip of Lysol spray, well, there are hundreds of different kinds of Lysol sprays and they all have different ingredients in them. So if you could have the bottle with you, you can tell us exactly what it is, then we can treat you and help you immediately.
对啊，所以说万一你不管是有不同的小孩子知道大人药，或是你不同人吃错药，马上打给他们，他们在20秒之内通常就会回应了，都接得到了，所以也不用担心，就是你不知道当下怎么处理，所以当下第一个反应应该就是直接打他们的电话，就是打那个1800的电话给他们，那他们的中心就会帮你马上处理。对，那最好的话，你要把那些物质，不管是你可能化学物质，可能小朋友吃了什么消毒药品，那消毒药品有很多不同的类别成分，如果你有那个东西在你的旁边，然后你可以念出来给他们，他们才知道怎么处理。
Would you mind turn your slides back to the opioid list, the one before fentanyl? I just want to write down some of the word. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
没关系，这个到时候我会转给大家，他们都有给我。
Oh.
Alex, did you want to take a stab at answering Paul's question from earlier?
Oh, I can try. And I hope going throughout it, Paul answered at least some portions of your questions earlier. Goodness. So you were, I want to make sure I'm addressing this properly. If I understood what you were asking correctly, it was a few things. It was Poison Center perspective on illegal substances, on illicit substances, and sort of what we thought about the legality of that. Is that correct? Is that what you were asking?
I think Paul is he left, I guess. I didn't see him.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think okay.
All right.
So you can still explain and he can watch the video later.
Perfect. And if anyone else is curious about this kind of answer, and I hinted at this a little bit earlier that the Poison Center, it's not that we're not concerned about legality. It's just that because we're so focused on trying to reduce harm in that specific moment, we're not going to dig into, well, where did you get this? Why are you using it? Are you dealing with addiction. Like it's not the kind of questions we'll ask, because that doesn't really help us help that individual in that moment. And we want everyone to feel comfortable calling us in any situation, legal or illegal. And we never want someone to feel that they shouldn't call us because we'll call the cops on them or something, because we won't. That's not our thing. Really, the only other entities we'll contact would be the emergency room or a hospital, in order to notify them that you're on the way or something like that.
所以他们主要就是想要帮助大家在当下赶快处理解决这些中毒啊、药物使用过度的问题啊。那他们并不会就是去说，打电话给警察说这个人使用不当的药物，因为他希望大家都是可以开放，可以非常的愿意打给他们，因为他们主要的目的就是要帮助大家解决当下的，就是让大家不要再受到更多的危害这样子。那唯一会有一些可能只会有医院啊，他们上次有提过，医院会打到他们咨询一些问题，对，那他们不会跟一些警察会有那些联络的，对。
And I'll just add that in Washington, we also have what's called the Good Samaritan law. So under that law, you will not get in trouble if you call about someone who needs medical care from an overdose. You won't get in trouble. The person who needs medical care will also not get in trouble. Even if it's an illegal substance, if it's a heroin or fentanyl overdose, it doesn't matter. You are protected under the law. You can call us and we will help you, and there will be no police involved, no legal repercussions from that.
对，华盛顿州有个法律是保障说，即使是那个人你知道的人，他是非法使用药物，但是你打电话就是给他们请求帮助的时候，不会有任何法律的问题。对，那法律有保障这个问题，那就这个事情，那他那个人不会有问题，你自己也不会有问题，他们会这是法律保障的。
Perfect. Thanks for adding that, Megan. That's a really important point. And I know Paul had mentioned marijuana or cannabis specifically, two different terms for the same substance or type of substance. If anyone is interested, we'd be happy to work with you all to put together a cannabis or marijuana specific presentation, because we have a lot of information on cannabis and marijuana.
Sure, why not?
对啊，如果大家我们可能之后会再安排一次，就是有关来讲解大麻或是使用大麻的一些资讯啊，如果大家有兴趣的话。对，那我想蛮多人大家应该有兴趣，我会再跟他们联络。
Yeah, it's education, so.
I wonder also if you guys can come back and talk about issues related to air quality, like storing some of the chemicals or the poisonous emissions from building materials. That area, maybe it's a bigger topic to cover as well, because I always doubted whether moving into a new house, the air quality is suitable for people to live in.
That's an excellent point. You know, we don't have materials sort of at the ready for that kind of thing, but we may be able to put something together and kind of pulling from other presentations we have on, you know, just off the top of my head, something we've noticed during COVID has been an increase in our exposures to cleaning materials. And a lot of times one of the concerns with cleaning materials is that they can create gases and fumes and can diminish the air quality like that. That's a really great idea though. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, because we also have a lot of materials on lead poisoning, so we could do kind of a environmental toxins, lead, mold, air pollution. Yeah, lots of different things we could cover.
Okay, that'll be great. Thank you.
I do have a question for all of you. I think our next presentation in June is on adolescent exposures, right, Jerry? Or something like talking about your grandkids and substances that they might be getting into, or teens, what they might be getting into.
Yes, I think it's in July, July 10th, yeah.
So I think we're going to talk about vaping and potentially a little bit about cannabis, but are there other substances that you would be interested in learning about that have to do with teens or young kids, teens, younger people?
我们在7月10号的时候，他们会再来讲有关有些毒品啊、物质滥用的一些问题。那主要可能就是之前大家有听过，可能会关心一下，就是你自己的孙子啊，他们一些可能会有一些使用不当的一些药物啊，或是化学药品的问题。那大家有没有专门对哪一些化学物质有一些兴趣的？他们可以准备一下，可以跟现在可以提出来。
I remember when I was young and people don't have too much a selection of drugs. So they're using the sort of a vaporing from the, what you call the rubber, how should I say the rubber?
Rubber cement?
Yeah, rubber cement stuff, you're sniffing and you're rubbing. Can you include those kind of things too?
We might be able to. We might be able to get our data analysts to give us some stats.
Yeah.
On that on different inhalants.
Additionally, I think if you can have a picture of those marijuana. When I came over to this country, I learned lots of a terminology I never heard of it before, like a mushroom from Mexico and hashish, all of those stuff. Can you bring some of the pictures so we can recognize? So since we probably have a distance from our grandkids, so it might be easier for us to look at those things so we can identify.
Absolutely. Visual aids are very helpful. So we have a lot of pictures in that. Depending on how much time we have, we may be able to bring, we have a few different kits that have different devices that we can, it's a little harder when we're not in person, but we can, kind of show them up to the camera like that.
Yeah, I think like some like example like different package of like some like common substance now, like some drug now, so people can identify if someone's using, they will notice this. Yeah, that will be great.
Perfect.
One more thing, just between a citizen to a citizen. When I walk around and see lots of homeless people, they use drugs or injection quite a bit. When we call 911, what's the normal situation? Do I need to stand by, wait for the 911 come by?
That's a good question. If my general stance on that is if you are taking the time to initiate a 911 call because you're concerned for someone's health in that moment, that it is best if you can stay that entire time. Because they're probably going to ask you a lot of questions about how that individual is doing, what symptoms to watch out for, because it gives them, it allows them to tell the paramedics what to expect when they enter the scene. I would say that calling and leaving, if it's, I'm concerned about this individual's health, I'd like an ambulance to come check them out, make sure they're okay. If you can't stay for whatever reason, I would argue it's still better to call anyway, so that that ambulance can get there, even if you can't stay that whole time.
Okay. Yeah, the homeless is just overwhelming everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of complex stuff there.
Right.
Y'all are asking some like top level questions. It's great because it's making me think of, we can include this next time and we can have a slide on this. And so I really appreciate all the thoughtfulness of your questions.
大家有没有什么其他的问题啊，或是下一次有关那些药物啊、毒品啊，想要知道的问题？不然差不多12点了，可以，然后可能差不多要结束咯。Yeah, I was asking them if they have the final question before we ending this session.
You can always send us an email.
Just from my observation, Megan passed along her old phone number to Alex now. So Alex will get all the questions from now on. Is that true, Megan?
Did I have it on? I might have had it incorrect on the last presentation I gave. It doesn't technically matter because we share a phone. So regardless.
I'm just kidding you.
He's on to your boy, Megan.
At least we'll pay attention to you, Megan.
Right? That's an eye for detail there.
I just want to say that, these safety related knowledge we've been sort of on our own picking up here and there. And I'm really glad that you guys came here to present it in a very organized manner. So I'm really, really like enjoying the educations, these seminars. Thank you.
Oh.
Good timing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That makes us happy to hear. That made my weekend. Thanks for saying that.
Well, since nobody has a question, the sun coming out. So you guys have a wonderful afternoon then.
You too.
Thank you. You all as well. Sun can be a rare thing in this part of the state. So take advantage.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all so much. And we'll see you in July.
Okay. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have
a nice day.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. 好，谢谢你们哦，那我要关掉喽。
谢谢小张，谢谢
你们，拜拜。
谢谢 Jerry， 拜拜。
谢谢你们去吃午餐，去走路散步了，拜拜。